Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and one of the things I wanted to address with you guys, and yeah, this is going to be coming a bit later because I tend to film my informative videos up to 2 weeks ahead of time. A lot of people aren't aware of that, but some of the debates that have come up, I've heard guys like Athlete X try to do this whole concept of, well, we do these one-legged exercises to prevent muscle imbalances and to correct muscle imbalances. And, that's itself a bit of a hustle. And the reason I say that is that if you're talking about people who are going to get hurt or injured in any sort of serious contact sport or who have muscle imbalances, things like leg presses, things like one-legged exercises, stuff like that are what create the muscle imbalances. And I think one of the things that we need to talk about is the fact that in certain Olympic lifting circles, the Bulgarian split squat got popular because it was this whole idea of you can unload some of the axial loading off the back by doing these Bulgarian split squats and still train each leg independently. Well, what people need to understand, this was not novice lifters. This wasn't being done with grown men who squat 300 pounds for a few reps, right? This was being done with people who had 500 and 600 pound squats already. And when you can squat 600 pounds and you're doing tons of power cleans and snatches and all this other stuff these Olympic lifters are doing, at a certain point you experience a large amount of axial loading. That can become a recovery issue. And so if you take a 600 pound squatter and you throw a 315 on their back, right? And then have them do one leg behind them on a little block a few inches above them and one leg forward, that's the original Bulgarian split squat. You're not supposed to have a bent knee on the leg that's behind you up on a bench. That is not what the lift is. That they noticed that it did strengthen their legs and carry over pretty well to their squats and everything else. But they didn't have the extra axial loading. But that doesn't mean that they're not doing the heavy work. The majority of their work and their real training was done with the other stuff, and it was so they could get more training volume. But you're talking about people who are doing 20, 30 sets of squats a week already. Usually, and this is being done with people obviously who are genetically gifted, usually people who are cheating a little on their drug tests. This is not the average Joe lifter. And it's certainly not even, a lot of the athletes that people are thinking of. These are brutally strong people. Well, this has gotten carried over to the point to where it's this idea, well, you can do that to improve recovery and have less axial loading, which is something I agree with ultra elite athletes, but you need to be really, really strong for that to become a factor. Now, axial loading can become an issue when you start doing really silly shit like above the knee rack pulls with double what you can deadlift. But, if you're a 400 pound squatter and a 500 pound deadlifter, you probably don't need to spend a lot of time thinking about axial loading. You just don't. You don't, unless you're putting in enormous amounts of training volume. Then you might say, well, I might need to do some slight variations that reduce axial loading. And that's where things like box squats come into play. Things like that. But we don't need to go to one-legged exercises for that. And the one-legged exercises actually create the imbalances. The leg press creates the imbalance. And here's what I mean. When you look at historical lifters in real strength sports, I'm not talking about bodybuilding gym bros and this silly ass bodybuilding world. I'm talking about real athletes, people who actually train and know how to do more than just get a pump and pin, a gram of test and a gram of trend, right? People who actually know how to train because they have to train, they have to perform. Hell, they might even have to perform after passing a drug test, so they've got to be off their gear. Not saying they're clean, but they got to be clean part of the time. And they got to be clean at competition time. They might need to actually learn how to train. It's a different world. You don't see this problem of the back becoming a limiting factor, right? Because people have trained their squat and their deadlifts and their cleans and their other lifts all together at the same time. And therefore their core and their back and everything else grows in perfect strength with their legs. Well, if you want to develop an imbalance, how do you think you develop an imbalance? Do imbalance training? Go spend 50% of your leg sets doing one-legged exercises. And if you do some silly shit like that, which is what you're seeing some of the stuff being done to promote, then what's going to happen? Well, yeah, all of a sudden you've got a weak core and a weak back, and all of a sudden you now have a muscle imbalance. Now you're going to have to do a bunch of extra core work. You have to do extra back work. Now you're going to need specialized training because you created the imbalance already doing the silly ass one-legged exercises. Same thing. What happens when you go start doing 5 or 6 heavy sets of leg press every week, right? And you start minimizing your squats. What happens then? All of a sudden you have people out of the goofy ass bodybuilding world. Oh man, the squat, like your back really limits your squat. Well, no shit. What do you think was going to happen when you trained your legs separately from your back for 2 years straight? And then all of a sudden you're a big guy with 29-inch legs and you can only squat 365. But you have legs strong enough to squat 450 because you did, sets with 1,200 pounds all day long on the leg press, right? For sets of 20. And didn't spend any time under a barbell. So now you do have a weak core. You do have weak erectors. You do have weak abdominals. You have weak thoracic erectors. You have a weak back. And then you try to get under a squat bar, and then of course you're like, oh yeah, man, the legs just aren't a primary mover anymore. The back's a limiting factor. Well, you created that imbalance yourself. The damn leg press created the imbalance. You created it. That's not the normal strength balance. We are perfectly capable of doing nothing but barbell back squats and building strong, powerful legs and building a powerful squat, right? Been done by thousands and thousands of athletes. That's all that's required. I'm not saying we shouldn't do supplemental lifts. Hell, you see me doing supplemental lifts. But that is all that's required to build a base. And if you're doing other stuff and then you create an imbalance, because that is a normal movement pattern. To squat, that's a normal movement pattern. Well, you've created the strength imbalance yourself. And it's real funny that you have coaches who start promoting all these one-legged exercises and then they want to sell strength imbalance fixing. You don't think that's a bit of a hustle? I mean, they're the ones who created the imbalance to begin with. That imbalance wouldn't have been there if you just taught people to squat correctly and they worked on their squat as a primary exercise. That imbalance wouldn't have been developed to begin with. Then people will say, well, what about compensatory strength and single leg exercises? What do you really think that you don't use compensatory strength on those? You don't think you use compensatory strength on those? You don't think that when you train your weaker leg first, your body doesn't know how to compensate? You don't think that it adjusts your center of gravity over that weight? I mean, people have this weird idea, just like they do with dumbbells, and I've disproven before, that just because you load the weight on one limb that you're going to replicate the exact identical rep with both legs. It's going to be identical loading over that leg. Just because you're doing it on one leg, well, your center of gravity is going to adjust. You could still develop very strong compensatory strength imbalances. You can develop unilateral imbalances doing one-legged work. Why wouldn't you think that you could? If you want to not develop these imbalances, you need to focus on being even in the way you perform your lifts, right? Do a little bit of variation with your stuff. Maybe 2 different types of barbell squats, 2 different sorts of deadlifts, kind of like you guys see me doing, right? You can correct some of those left to right imbalances. You can correct them by using really, really good form, by keeping your torso really tight, not allowing the bar to swing back and forth, maybe not doing mixed grip or alternating it. That's why you guys see me doing the hook grip on everything. Everything's balanced left to right by just using a hook grip. Placing your feet perfectly centering the barbell perfectly center over your back. Making sure that your form is good enough that you're not having one side dip 3 inches lower than the other. Not hitching on your deadlifts, right? Locking everything even. That will resolve most of these imbalances, right? Not grinding out grinder reps that force you to use compensatory strength. That's where you develop unilateral imbalances with a barbell, is when you allow compensatory strength when you hit a set to failure. I can tell you right now, coaches who have people taking sets of squats to failure, to where they have to use one side, their stronger side, to do the last rep a lot more. They have to grind it. It gets an uneven lockout. And by the way, muscle failure doesn't cause more growth or strength. So there's no reason to do it other than to create bad form on the last rep. Again, same thing. You see coaches who promote training to failure on the squat are the same ones who want to talk about unilateral imbalances and compensatory strength. Well, no shit, you created that. You created that with bad programming. By programming in such a way that your athletes are going to use compensatory strength on the last rep. So then they develop imbalances. So then you have them do some silly one-legged exercises, which also has the potential to continue the same imbalances that you created. And now they have a weak core, they now have weak backs, and now you need more supplemental lifts to fix that. When they should just be able to do a little bit of core work after doing their big lifts and be done with it. It's these one-legged movements. It's bad programming, and it's doing lower body specific stuff to where you say, hey, I want to train my legs instead of I want to train my whole body. All right? That is how you develop these imbalances. And these imbalances cause injuries. These imbalances cause athletes to have unilateral imbalances, to have back and core versus leg imbalances. It's bad training. And it's stuff that no one wants to think about when they start saying, oh, we'll just throw all these extra lifts in. We'll just do these and train these hard. And then they wonder why their athletes are imbalanced. Either that or they plan it intentionally so that they can sell them the solution. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.